Hey everyone, and welcome to another edition of Board Games Hitting My Table. So in this series I talk about all the non-new to me board games that I've played over the last couple of weeks. This episode covering the second half of July 2022. I've mainly been playing lighter games and quicker games because all the new to me games have been of the heavier variety. So be sure to keep an eye out for my monthly review dropping tomorrow because I've got some pretty juicy titles on that list. But before I get started on the games I've been playing, I want to give a shout out to the show's sponsor, Kienda.co.uk, who are my go-to online retailer here in the UK. And if you use my link in the show notes, you can get 5% off your first order. But let's get started on the games, and we're going to start with Paolo Mori's Caesar Sees Rome in 20 minutes. So if you've been keeping up with my content recently, I've been talking about Caesar quite a lot because this very simple two-player game has really impressed me, and I can't get enough of it at the moment, actually. So this is a very tense, small and compact little area majority game as you are trying to control the different regions, of course, by placing these discs that you're drawing out of your bag. You have very limited options and only certain tokens can go on certain spots. But I love the way that these tokens kind of go on the borderlines between two different areas. So some might be high on one area and low on the other, and it's all about trying to, almost bid or contribute the exact right amount of control that you need. And you also need to factor in that when you close the regions off, you get one of these bonus tokens which can become useful in a bunch of different ways. So we actually played a best of 3 games with this one, and I introduced this to a gamer who had never played it before. And it was really tight, definitely the tightest games I've had of this yet. It went right down to the wire, neck and neck games, and really, really good experience. And I think it's definitely one of the best two-player games to come out in quite some time, and it continues to impress me. So yeah, definitely still recommend Caesar. And whenever I get a two-player or an opportunity to play two-player games, it always gets out. Next up, we have Sweet Landia, which is a game that, again, definitely flown under the radar. I did do a review of this one, but I think naturally because it's not very known, it didn't get much, or didn't get many views or much traction. But this game is a really cool little filler, almost bidding, I suppose, but it's mainly a set collection style game. And you have a system much like For Sale, where you have a hand of cards, and you're using these to blind bid on these other cards that you are trying to collect in front of you to build a little tableau of cards to score you points in different ways. They synergize with each other. Some of them can stay in your tableau for the 3 rounds that you play. Very snappy, very quick, and it's just a real pleasant experience that, it's stayed around, and staying around in my collection nowadays is quite difficult. And yeah, really enjoyed it. Some definitely different, lots of different pathways you can go down to score points, and it just has that right amount of luck, randomness, but still some good decisions. So that is Sweet Landia. We squeezed in a 3-player game, actually, so very small player counts to play So Clover, but this was just to close off a games day, and we had 20 minutes or so left, and we just thought, we can play a game of So Clover and just take our time and enjoy the experience. And we actually did pretty well, considering some of the clues we had were pretty difficult, and I made a massive mistake by writing a clue associating to a clue card that I misread. So I actually, I think the word was archaeology, and I read it as architect. So the clue I gave didn't link to archaeology at all, which did throw a bit of a spanner in the works, but still really enjoyable. I don't really care how this, how we score or how well we do. It's just a real fun party game experience that you just enjoy, a bit of word association. So I definitely rank this one up there with the Just Ones of the world, and I might even slightly prefer So Clover because you have to. I think the word association is a bit more difficult, and it's the pairing of words sometimes just do not go together, which means you have to really think outside the box. I played a game of Rustling Leaves, which is actually a game I've only just reviewed, so be sure to check out my review that I dropped on just a day or 2 ago. This is another game by Paolo Mori, actually, who was the designer of Caesar that I've already spoken about. This is a very simple roll and write game, but when you're rolling dice, you are actually closing off these different symbols. And when you close these boxes off, you're going to tick off a certain symbol in that box, which will score you points in a bunch of different ways. And there's loads of restrictions. There's tons of different ways you can score. And it's a 15-20 minute game that is just engaging from start to finish, a different use of dice. And I think we played the winter map which, the maps are generally, not massively different, but they're different enough to be interesting. And as far as roll and write games go, this is right up there for me. And just consistently hitting the table because it is so breezy, yet still fun. So that is Rustling Leaves. I also played a game of Fleet the Dice Game, which is another roll and write game and definitely a step up from something like Rustling Leaves. A lot more complexity in this game. And in this one, you are essentially trying to build a fleet of fishing vessels and then fill those vessels up with fish because fish are going to score you points. But as you go along the game, you can get loads of upgrades and buildings and things just to make you more efficient and better. And it's definitely one of those games that has that huge potential to string actions together. I really like it. It has some element or some potential to confuse newer gamers. Like, we introduced this to someone who'd never played it before, and I think they were a bit overwhelmed at times. But by the time it got 3 rounds in or so, it was starting to flow a lot better, because once you get your head over all what the different buildings do, it's actually not that complicated, but there's still, a lot of options. I think it's more of a breadth of options rather than the depth of options, if that makes sense. But I still really like this one. It's definitely up there again with the better roll and write games. And I've still yet to review this one. Maybe I need to play it another time or two to fully solidify my thoughts. But at the moment, it's still very positive. It gave my shield of quality under my initial impressions. And we had a very tight game. I think we finished on 98, 99 and 100 points respectively. So only 2 points in it from last place to first place, which is always good fun when a game comes right down to the wire. So that is Fleet the Dice Game. More kind of roll and flip and write style games coming on here. This is Get On Board. And while this one you are not actually writing stuff down, you're very much playing like a roll and write game as you're placing these tracks down, or these basically little wooden sticks down on this main board, but you're doing that by flipping cards, which will show the different tracks you can build. You're trying to pick up these different, public transport users and drop them off to other places to score you points in different ways again. You can see here it has a very roll and write style sheet here, despite having a board. But this one, definitely one of the most pleasantly, just charming little games that I have in my collection. Another 20-minute experience, but some good decisions. And normally in this game, I try to stick to the objective card that you get allocated at the start of the game, because you can get a lot of points from doing that if you reach a bunch of different checkpoints by the end of the game. This time I thought, that normally works against me because it is so restrictive. I thought, I'll ignore my main objective. I'll just focus on the passengers and getting points the other way. And that went, massively worked against me. I think this is the worst showing I've ever had in Get On Board. I got very few points, but still really fun, because it is so quick, it doesn't really matter. And I even managed to avoid all the traffic, which is like a negative thing you get if you share the same road as somebody else. I avoided all that, but still managed to completely tank in terms of my points scoring. But love this one. I don't really see this one going anywhere soon. And I think a lot of people could enjoy this one if they knew about it. That is Get On Board at New York and London. I played a 2-player game. Well, this is only a 2-player game of Kaching, another very unknown game, very tight little economic style game, I suppose, as you're drafting these cards like this that's come in these, I think it's 5 columns, and as you draft them, you are trying to get pairs of high numbers of the same colour, because the second action you can do is to combine those cards together and multiply them in order to get money back into your supply. So you are trying to get as much money as you can. And normally when I play this game, it's so low scoring because you just completely block your opponents and prevent them from getting anything done. But in this game, it somehow managed to flow in a way where we both scored pretty damn well. Definitely one of the highest scoring games I've had. And it's really good. This is definitely one of those games with the turn angst, and one of those games where you just got to be so careful about the opportunities that you leave your opponents, because if you make one mistake, then they can get a huge multiplier, which will make it difficult to catch up with. But in the same vein, you have to, you're forced to take these moves. You cannot pass or anything like that. You either have to buy or you have to sell. So, sometimes you just do not want to do either. Very good, criminally underrated. That is Kaching. We played a 3-player game of Nefertiti. I have briefly covered this game on the channel before, but I'd only played it the once, so this is the second time I've played this pretty simple bidding style game. So in this game, you have this board here, and on this board you have all these different auction houses, I suppose. And essentially what you're trying to do is you're placing meeples down, deciding how much you want to bid to take it, or to place there, with the idea of when the auction houses close, that you'll get to claim these different cards. And the cards are just simple set collection, but it uses that mechanism, which is actually quite seldom used, where if you are the only player with a certain item, it's worth more to you. So the more people who own that item, it gets diluted. So you want to be kind of monopolizing the items, I suppose. But the spin on this game is that all the auction houses close in a different way. So some of them you might need to get a combined value of 17 plus with all the bids that are going into it. Or this one here, you need to have 4 pieces touching each other in a chain. And a further twist on it is that if you have bid there, and somebody, say, buys a card before you, and then it comes to your turn, you can actually choose to buy a card, or you can take half the money that was already spent in that auction house to keep you going in the game. So it actually does have some pretty clever mechanisms in this one. I'm not entirely kind of sold by it. I think it's good. I don't think it's up there with the great auction and bidding games. And there's also some cards, kind of these public cards that you can claim, which I think are a bit confusing at times. I think they're not ultimately necessary, and the rest of it was fine. I completely neglected this part of the game, and I managed to win quite convincingly. So yeah, I'm not sure if it added to the experience, but I do like it. I don't love it. I'm probably thinking it's going to go a 6 or 6.5 out of 10, but maybe that will change. But to be honest, I can't really see it changing too much. So that is Nefertiti, a solid one, and I do enjoy it, and it's pretty quick, but not quite up there with the greats. On to the last few games here now. We have played a 3-player game of Rumble Nation. So another one that I've been kind of covering a bit over the last couple of months. Very simple area majority game that's dice driven. So you're rolling 3 dice. You're going to split them as you like. One of those dice is going to show the amount of cubes you can put down, and the other 2 dice are going to show the region which you can deploy them in. So mechanically, yeah, bare bones, simple stuff. But the cool thing about this game is how it scores. Because when it comes to the end, whoever's got the most cubes in the region, of course, is going to get the most points. But additionally, if in the order that these areas are resolved, it's going to start chain reactioning into all the different regions by kind of adding neutral cubes to support your adjacent troops. So sometimes if you control a low region, it means you can bolster the next regions to you, and then if you win that one, it might bolster the next region to that, and it can massively cascade to really shake up the scoring conditions and shake up who's got the majorities. And it's definitely one of the best games that crescendo more than anything. It builds, you resolve, and the game is over. So definitely leaves you satisfied and leaves you wanting more. So yeah, another successful game of Rumble Nation. Personally, I'm absolutely terrible at this game. I don't know why I can't manage to win one at this, considering it is fairly random. But yeah, I've yet to win it, but I still love it. And yeah, it's a fantastic kind of gateway level area majority game with a lot of fun. Normally these area majority games are quite stuffy and quite dry. This one is far from that. That's why I recommend it so highly. Penultimately, we played a 3-player game of Celtics. So this is essentially Lost Cities, the board game. I think there is a game called that, but this is definitely of that vein, where you are trying to climb these different tracks by moving your tokens up them, and as you reach different checkpoints, you can get bonuses and collect these gems for scoring. But you can also reach these little kind of clovers here, which will boost up another piece of yours, and you can manage to chain reaction turns together and get loads of mileage out of your turns. But it's all based around this card play system that you've probably seen in a game like Lost Cities, where you have suits of the different colours, and as the game goes on, you can either numerically increase them or decrease them, but you cannot fill in the gaps. So you are quite limited on what you can play, and you have to carefully manage your hand by not only playing things in the right order, but also keeping an eye on what other cards, the cards that the other players are discarding, because they might be really useful for you. We actually played on the expansion board here, which comes in the main box in this version, where rather than every card associating to a individual track. They actually manage to kind of shift in and out as you go. So it might be like one color here, and then you can divert off a different route and keep changing as you go, which I thought was really interesting. And, you know, I think I might even prefer it to the basic version. The only issue with this game is that it does seem to take a bit too long. It does say 30 minutes here. I've had games that have taken almost double that. And, you know, we're not slow players, so I do think that's a bit misleading there. So yeah, it does take a bit too long and it can feel a bit slow at times. But I love the concept of it. But yeah, I think that's kind of works against it, and it's definitely a significant negative part of a otherwise really cool family weight game. But we did enjoy it, and I do love, again, I love the concept of it, but you know, it's not quite got the tension or the punchiness of something like Lost Cities. And finally, I played a 2-player game of Memes. So this one, such a cool worker placement game, all about running an ant colony. And this is another one of those games that just do not get talked about anymore. I have reviewed it, so if you're interested, you know, keep an eye out for that one, or have a look through my back catalogue for that video. But this is such a cool idea, as you have your ant colony, and you also have the main board here, which is obviously the surface area of the, you know, the grassland. And what you're doing is you're kind of breeding ants, you're sending them out to kill the bugs on the board, which will give you food and resources, you're upgrading your ant colony, and you're trying to get public objectives as well. But this is one of the tightest games that I think I've ever played in terms of having such little room to make errors. It's only a few rounds, and you need to make sure you're always progressing and upgrading, otherwise you can really hit a standstill. And that's what we did. You know, we managed to play the whole game with barely achieving anything. A poor showing. And considering this wasn't the first time I played this game, it was my worst showing by far. So yeah, I've definitely not learned from my mistakes on this one, but I still love it. It's definitely different to any other worker placement game out there. And yeah, despite being terrible at it, it's still a hell of a lot of fun, and it feels so different for a Euro worker placement game. Definitely recommend Memes. Really enjoy it. So that's it really. That's all the games that I've been playing during the second half of July 2022. As I said, be sure to keep an eye out for the new games that I've been playing. I'm dropping tomorrow because it's going to be a good one. But for everybody else, I'll see you next time on Chairman of the Board. Bye bye.